I stood frozen in our hallway, clutching Ben's favorite nachos and craft beer, when his voice echoed clearly from upstairs. Honestly, marrying Sophie was the biggest mistake of my life. The words hit me like ice cold water, stealing my breath. I'd come home early from Nashville, eager to surprise him. Just hours before, my friends had playfully teased me about how lucky I was, how perfect my marriage seemed. But now, standing in my own home, every illusion shattered with brutal clarity. Ben's voice, relaxed and cruelly casual, continued. If it wasn't for her family's money, I'd be gone already. 3 years of pretending, man, it's exhausting. My heart raced, my chest tight, fingers trembling against the paper bag. Everything I thought I knew unraveled with every bitter word he spoke. The laughter we'd shared, the vows we renewed just days before, they all suddenly felt meaningless, like beautiful decorations covering ugly cracks in the wall. Fighting the wave of nausea rising inside me, I carefully placed the food on the kitchen counter, backing silently toward the door, desperate not to make a sound. Outside, the evening sky blurred through tears that finally broke free. I climbed into my car, gripping the steering wheel tightly, the cold leather a stark reminder of my shattered reality. For so long, I'd carefully built a life around Ben, desperately chasing validation from my family, who saw our marriage as the ultimate achievement. Ben was always the perfect husband, charming, supportive, loving, but now, those qualities felt like cruel performances, calculated manipulations designed to keep me blind, compliant, and controllable. The familiar streets blurred as I drove aimlessly, replaying every moment of affection, every whispered, I love you, desperately searching for clues I should have seen earlier. But each memory only deepened the ache in my chest, mocking my blindness. At a red light, my phone buzzed, a text from Ben. Miss you, babe. Hope you're having fun. Can't wait until you're home. The audacity made me almost laugh. Instead, I felt a surge of anger, hot and intense, blending with a new clarity I'd never experienced before. In that instant, I realized Ben's betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was an attack on my dignity, a theft of my self-worth. I drove aimlessly until late evening, the city's familiar streets suddenly alien and cold. Finally, parked outside my best friend Kate's house, I hesitated. My finger hovered above her name, but something stopped me. Admitting the truth out loud would make it real, irreversible. Was I ready for that? But beneath the pain, beneath the humiliation, something powerful awakened inside me. A quiet strength I'd buried under years of silence. I'd spent my life making myself smaller, easier, less demanding, thinking that was love. Now, sitting alone in the dim glow of my car, I saw clearly for the first time that real love didn't require me to disappear. Taking a deep breath, I started the engine again, heading back toward my girlfriends. Tonight, I wouldn't reveal anything. Tonight, I'd play along, letting Ben believe he still controlled the narrative. Because now, I had my own story to tell, and for once, I would be the one holding the pen. Returning to my girlfriends felt surreal, as though I was stepping back into someone else's life. Scarlett's laughter echoed through the hotel suite. Tina scrolled through her phone distractedly, and Rachel gently sipped her wine. But I couldn't shake off Ben's words. They clung to me, shadowing every forced smile. You okay, Sophie? Rachel's voice broke my thoughts. She studied me carefully, eyes gentle but questioning. I nodded quickly, forcing a convincing laugh. Just tired from traveling. But the lie felt bitter on my tongue. Even as I smiled, something inside me was shifting. That night, while everyone slept, I lay awake, staring into the darkness. I replayed our 3 years of marriage in my head, every tender moment now tainted with suspicion. Had I ever truly known Ben, or was I just blinded by the desire for acceptance from my parents, always desperate to prove I was worthy of love? Morning came with a quiet resolve. I couldn't confront Ben, not yet, but I couldn't simply pretend either. I would start by quietly observing, gathering proof, and understanding exactly how deep his betrayal went. As we boarded our flight home, I meticulously mapped my next steps in my mind, every action intentional, cautious. Arriving home, Ben greeted me warmly, his embrace just a touch too tight, his kiss lingering a moment too long, as though sensing something was different but unable to pinpoint exactly what. Missed you, babe, he whispered, voice soft, eyes searching mine. I missed you too, I replied calmly, gently withdrawing, noting his subtle confusion. Days passed slowly. Behind my smile, I was secretly monitoring our joint accounts, noting unusual transactions. $200, $300, always just below amounts that would require explanation. Then one afternoon, as Ben showered, I quietly slipped into his study, heart pounding but determined. That's when I found his secret phone again. My breath quickened as I scrolled through messages. Conversations with Lisa, his ex-girlfriend, made everything brutally clear. 2 more years, one message read. Then we're finally free. My stomach twisted violently. Ben's plan wasn't just about money, it was about completely rebuilding his life without me. Hot anger surged through me, tempered only by an icy clarity. If Ben thought he could quietly drain our marriage until there was nothing left, he was tragically mistaken. The following afternoon, I discreetly met with a lawyer named Julia, recommended by Rachel, someone outside my family's influence. Sitting in her small, warmly lit office, the magnitude of my actions finally hit me. As I presented the evidence I'd quietly gathered, I felt oddly detached, observing myself from afar. Who was this woman, calmly preparing to dismantle the life she'd worked so hard to build? Julia listened attentively, finally leaning forward. You know, Sophie, fighting back doesn't make you less kind or less loving. It simply means you finally see your worth clearly enough to protect it. Her words resonated deeply, steadying the tremble in my hands. I nodded slowly, determined yet still vulnerable. So what now? Now we gather everything, Julia replied firmly, but quietly, carefully. Back home that night, Ben prepared dinner, something he rarely did. His smile felt forced, strained beneath the mask of normalcy. We ate in awkward silence, each casual comment loaded with hidden meaning. I saw uncertainty flickering behind his eyes, my subtle emotional withdrawal unsettling him more deeply than I'd anticipated. You seem different lately, he finally said, voice guarded yet probing. Just busy, I replied softly, meeting his gaze without flinching. A lot on my mind, that's all. He nodded slowly, uncertainty still clouding his expression. Later that night, I lay awake beside him, feeling the quiet tension stretch endlessly between us. In the darkness, I silently reaffirmed my decision. I wouldn't remain the woman who quietly accepted betrayal. Instead, I would become the woman who saw the truth and did something about it. As I closed my eyes, a quiet voice whispered inside me, stronger than ever. This isn't the end. It's only the beginning. Days turned into weeks, each filled with quiet tension and calculated normalcy. To the outside world, our life appeared flawless, yet inside, I felt myself quietly drifting further away, carefully stepping back from the woman I'd been. I'd grown adept at hiding my suspicions beneath smiles, gently pulling away from Ben without raising alarm. One evening, as the sunset painted the kitchen walls golden, I casually mentioned I'd meet Emma for coffee downtown. Ben paused mid-text, glancing up sharply. Emma again? He asked, a careful edge hidden beneath his curiosity. Just catching up, I replied softly, refusing to offer more details. Ben nodded slowly, clearly uncomfortable but unable to question me further without risking exposure. At the cafe, Emma waited patiently, her warm presence offering comfort I desperately needed. Sitting across from her, I hesitated, unsure how much to share, fearing judgment, embarrassment, even pity. Emma watched me carefully, sensing my inner turmoil. Sophie, she began gently, reaching across the table to hold my trembling hand. What's really going on? Her question felt like the opening of a long-held floodgate. I hesitated briefly, then quietly revealed everything. The overheard conversation, the hidden phone, the suspicious withdrawals. With each confession, a painful weight lifted from my chest, replaced gradually by an unfamiliar clarity. Emma listened quietly, eyes wide with sympathy, never interrupting. When I finally finished, she leaned forward, her voice firm yet compassionate. Sophie, you've spent your entire life proving your worth to people who don't truly see you. Your parents, your husband, even some friends. Isn't it time to finally put yourself first? The truth in her words echoed deeply inside me. I stared into my coffee, suddenly aware how small my world had become, how tightly I'd wrapped my identity around pleasing others, earning love and approval through silence and compliance. You think I've been too passive? I whispered softly, eyes searching hers for confirmation. Emma reached across the table, squeezing my hand gently. I think you've been strong for so long you forgot what it's like to feel safe. But Sophie, you don't owe Ben, or anyone, blind forgiveness. Your kindness is your strength, not your weakness. Her words resonated deep within me, stirring a fire I hadn't realized was there. Emma's encouragement sparked determination, empowering me to face truths I'd spent years running from. Later that evening, returning home, I found Ben in the living room, anxiously scrolling through his phone. His eyes snapped up instantly, carefully masking relief beneath a smile. "Did you have fun?" he asked, attempting casualness, but I saw his unease clearly. "It was good," I said calmly, letting the silence linger purposefully. "I needed someone to talk to." He hesitated briefly, uncertainty flashing briefly behind his eyes before he forced a reassuring smile. "You can always talk to me, Sophie." I nodded softly, meeting his gaze calmly. "I know." Days later, while Ben worked late, I quietly moved through our home, opening drawers, studying old receipts, uncovering hidden details of the life Ben had carefully concealed from me. My fingers trembled slightly as I sifted through layers of deception, secret bank transfers, small withdrawals steadily building into a frightening pattern. Ben had been siphoning money to Lisa for months, far longer than I'd imagined, and each discovery deepened the wounds within me. Then one night, I stumbled upon something that sent an icy chill down my spine. Hidden beneath a stack of paperwork was a handwritten note from Lisa. "Can't wait until this charade is finally over. Just hold on a little longer. We're so close, love." I stared blankly at the words, feeling the final remnants of denial crumble away. Ben's betrayal wasn't impulsive or recent, it was cold, calculated, years in the making. I carefully photographed the evidence, placing everything back exactly as I'd found it, heart pounding with a mixture of pain and determination. That night, as I lay quietly beside Ben, my body tense yet controlled, clarity settled firmly within me. This wasn't merely about betrayal or financial deception. It was a harsh wake-up call about my own complacency, about how easily I'd handed over control of my happiness and self-worth to others. In the silent darkness, a newfound strength stirred inside me. It whispered reassuringly that despite the pain, despite the uncertainty ahead, I was no longer helpless. I had finally begun reclaiming myself, piece by powerful piece. Sitting in the softly lit waiting room outside Dr. Harris's office, I stared at my trembling hands, realizing this was the first time I'd truly allowed myself to seek help. My heart raced with uncertainty. All my life, I'd been conditioned to believe strength meant enduring silently, never showing vulnerability. Admitting I needed help felt strangely foreign, yet deeply necessary. "Come in, Sophie," Dr. Harris invited gently from the doorway, her voice calm, welcoming. I stood hesitantly, following her into the office, the warm, neutral walls and soothing scent of lavender offering a momentary comfort. Settling into the plush armchair opposite her, I felt suddenly exposed, raw and vulnerable beneath her compassionate gaze. "So, Sophie," she began gently, notebook resting lightly on her lap, "what brings you here today?" I hesitated, a tight knot forming in my throat. How could I explain the tangled web of betrayal, pain, and my own complicity in losing myself? "I think I've spent my entire life waiting for permission to exist," I finally admitted softly, tears filling my eyes. "First from my parents, now from my husband. But now I feel lost, like I don't even know who I am anymore." Dr. Harris nodded slowly, her gaze understanding, never judgmental. "Tell me more about that feeling. When did you first begin noticing it?" I hesitated, memories flooding back. My parents subtly reinforcing the message that my worth lay in how I made others look, how I pleased them. Christmases spent quietly watching my sister Olivia receive lavish gifts while mine remained practical, overlooked. My father's approval always seemed just out of reach, reserved only for achievements that enhanced the family's image. The realization brought tears silently to my eyes. "It's always been there," I finally admitted, voice shaking. "I just never questioned it. Being loved felt like something I had to earn, constantly." She leaned forward slightly, gentle but firm. "Sophie, love isn't something you earn by sacrificing yourself. Real love respects boundaries. It honors your authenticity. Perhaps the real question here is, have you ever truly felt valued just for being you?" My chest tightened sharply, her words piercing through my carefully constructed defenses. Tears blurred my vision, but beneath the pain something stirred, a quiet recognition of truth I'd long buried beneath my attempts to appear perfect and accommodating. "Dr. Harris's voice broke softly through my thoughts. "It sounds like you've spent your whole life chasing approval. But what if you didn't need anyone else's validation to know you're worthy?" Her words sank into me, heavy yet liberating. Tears welled in my eyes, slipping silently down my cheeks, warm yet cleansing. For the first time, I allowed myself to fully acknowledge the depth of my emotional exhaustion, the cost of constantly molding myself into whatever shape others demanded. Our session ended quietly, leaving me both emotionally drained and strangely hopeful. As I stepped outside, the sunlight felt brighter, clearer somehow. The gentle warmth caressed my skin, and for the first time, I allowed myself to believe that perhaps I deserved more than conditional affection, more than love rooted in compliance or convenience. That night, alone in the kitchen, I experimented with a new recipe, the scent of fresh herbs and sizzling garlic filling the room. Ben stood awkwardly by the doorway, watching me, clearly unsure how to interpret this sudden shift in my behavior. "Trying something new?" he asked hesitantly. I glanced up, offering a simple, genuine smile. "Yes, I've realized I've spent so long making sure everyone else is happy that I forgot what happiness feels like for myself." He shifted uneasily, clearly sensing deeper meaning in my words. "Are you sure everything's all right?" I nodded calmly, holding his gaze steadily. "Actually, I think things are finally starting to be." Ben frowned slightly, visibly unsettled by my newfound quiet strength. As he retreated from the kitchen, confusion shadowing his expression, I felt an unexpected surge of confidence. In the quiet solitude of the kitchen, a realization blossomed gently yet powerfully. Ben's discomfort wasn't my problem anymore. I'd begun a journey far bigger than my marriage, deeper than family expectations, a journey back toward myself. And this time, the approval I sought wasn't from Ben, my parents, or anyone else, it was my own. I parked my car outside Julia's office early Monday morning, gripping the steering wheel tightly as my heart thumped erratically. The weekend in the mountains had clarified many things, most painfully, the depth of Ben's deceit, but it had also reinforced a quiet resolve within me. Inside the warm, softly lit office, Julia greeted me with her usual calm presence. We sat down and she slid a folder across her desk, her eyes cautious but steady. "Sophie, the financial audit you requested uncovered something alarming." I flipped through the document silently, each page a revelation. Ben had been quietly withdrawing significant sums, systematically funneling money toward accounts registered under Lisa's name, careful amounts just small enough to remain unnoticed. My stomach twisted sharply, yet beneath that sickening feeling was a growing clarity. "How long?" My voice trembled slightly. "At least 18 months," Julia replied gently. "Ben was meticulous, but patterns don't lie." Julia's steady gaze met mine, a quiet strength radiating from her. "Sophie, your instincts were right. You deserve better. But it's crucial we proceed carefully now, strategically." I nodded, my mind already racing forward. "What should I do next?" Julia leaned forward, carefully placing a list in front of me. "Secure your assets first. Quietly transfer any remaining funds you can safely move. Document everything thoroughly. Most importantly, maintain appearances with Ben. We don't want him to suspect anything until you're ready." As I left her office, the morning sunlight seemed harsh, painfully bright, illuminating truths I'd long avoided. Returning home, I spent the day meticulously executing Julia's advice. I transferred money cautiously into secure accounts, documented every suspicious withdrawal and transaction, photographing receipts, emails, and texts with precise determination. In the following days, I subtly shifted my interactions with Ben, maintaining a careful balance between distant politeness and quiet detachment. When he suggested dinners, movies, or lavish vacations, I would gently decline, claiming work commitments or headaches, excuses simple yet effective enough to unsettle him. Late one evening, as rain tapped rhythmically against the windows, I sat alone at the kitchen table, sorting through financial documents. My phone buzzed softly, an unknown number illuminating the screen. Curiosity outweighed caution, and I hesitantly answered. "Sophie?" A hesitant female voice came through the speaker. "It's Lisa. Please don't hang up." I froze, heart pounding wildly, every nerve alert. "Why are you calling me?" Her voice quivered, unexpectedly vulnerable. "I just found out something. I think you should know the truth." I gripped the phone tightly, breath shallow, pulse racing. "Go on." "Ben promised me you two were divorcing." Lisa's voice broke slightly. "He told me the money was from his personal investments. I swear, Sophie, I didn't know. He lied to both of us." I felt dizzy, reality spinning momentarily out of reach, yet somehow my voice remained calm, steady. Why tell me this now? Lisa hesitated before responding, her tone filled with shame and bitterness. Because I discovered I wasn't the only one. Ben's been seeing someone else too. He's been lying to both of us for a very long time. The call ended abruptly, leaving me sitting in stunned silence, Lisa's words echoing loudly in my mind. Another betrayal, deeper, crueler. Yet strangely, instead of feeling broken, I felt my resolve crystallize further. The man I'd trusted completely had proven himself not merely deceitful, but dangerous in ways I'd never imagined. Hours later, Ben arrived home, soaking wet from the rainstorm, nervously avoiding my gaze. I watched calmly from across the room, feeling a newfound clarity. The truth was ugly, painful, yet empowering in its starkness. I realized clearly, finally, that the power Ben held over me had always been an illusion, a fragile spell built from my desperate need for validation. Ben paused, sensing my gaze, confusion flickering across his features. Everything okay, Sophie? I nodded slowly, calmly. Just thinking. He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. About what? I smiled gently, almost peacefully. About how freeing it feels to finally see things clearly. His eyes widened slightly, fear flickering briefly before he quickly masked it with an uneasy smile. He sensed something had shifted, but he couldn't quite grasp what. And in that small uncertainty, I found strength. As the evening stretched quietly onward, I understood deeply that this wasn't just a battle over betrayal or money. It was about reclaiming myself. For too long, I'd allowed others to dictate my worth, seeking approval where none was deserved. Now, standing alone yet stronger than ever, I felt ready. Ben had no idea what was coming next, but soon he would. The calm before the storm was ending, and I was finally prepared to face whatever lay ahead, unafraid and unyielding. The morning sunlight poured softly through the tall windows of my father's study, illuminating the room with a gentle warmth that seemed at odds with the tension gathering inside. Across from me sat Ben, calm and composed, clearly unaware of the storm that was about to break. My parents and Julia, my lawyer, completed the circle, their expressions serious, guarded. My father cleared his throat gently, breaking the uncomfortable silence. Sophie, Ben, is there something you'd like to discuss openly before we proceed? Ben's eyes flicked quickly toward me, suspicion and discomfort flickering briefly beneath his practiced calm. He forced a smile. Nothing on my end. Everything's perfectly fine. I felt a slow burning anger begin to rise, my heart beating steadily in my chest. Calmly, without speaking, I opened the folder in front of me and slid it across the polished mahogany desk toward my father. The documents, carefully printed and highlighted, spoke louder than words ever could. "What's this?" Ben asked lightly, though his voice trembled just slightly, betraying his anxiety. I kept my voice steady, meeting his gaze directly. "Proof, Ben. Proof that you've been systematically stealing from our joint accounts, funneling my family's money to multiple secret accounts and relationships. Proof of your conversations with Lisa, Denise, and others. All the things you thought you'd hidden perfectly." Ben's face turned pale, eyes widening as panic took hold. He reached toward the documents hesitantly, fingers shaking, but quickly withdrew them as if touching the papers would confirm their truth. Silence filled the room, each ticking second amplifying the tension. "That's absurd," he finally stammered, forcing a weak laugh. "Sophie, clearly you're misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" I interrupted softly, voice clear but firm. "Ben, you called our marriage a nightmare, said I was nothing more than your financial convenience. You've manipulated everyone around you, believing you could continue indefinitely without consequences." His face grew pale, jaw tightening, eyes desperately seeking an ally around the room but finding none. My parents sat silently, eyes burning with barely suppressed fury, their trust shattered. My father's disappointment was palpable, my mother's eyes filled with quiet disbelief. Ben turned desperately toward them, attempting his usual charm. "You can't seriously believe this, right? This is Sophie being emotional." But my father raised his hand sharply, silencing Ben instantly. "Enough, Ben. We've seen everything. Documents, messages, financial trails. Sophie has been meticulous." He paused, his voice trembling with controlled anger. "You've betrayed not just Sophie, but our entire family." Ben's facade finally cracked completely, panic and desperation flooding his face. He turned toward me, voice breaking. "Sophie, please. We can work through this." Think of the years we've spent together. Are you really going to throw it all away over one mistake? It wasn't one mistake, I replied quietly, feeling a surprising calmness envelop me. It was countless decisions, every day for years, choosing deceit over honesty. And this time, I choose me. The silence in the room deepened, thick and suffocating. Ben's shoulders slumped, his confidence evaporating into fear. He knew he'd lost control, his careful facade shattered beyond repair. My mother's voice broke the silence, softer, supportive. We stand with Sophie. You've betrayed her trust, and ours. The financial and legal consequences will reflect that. Ben sat frozen, eyes wide with shock, as Julia handed him the divorce papers, prepared meticulously, decisively, leaving no loopholes. Watching him quietly panic, fumbling through the documents, felt strangely surreal, but undeniably satisfying. Yet there was no joy in this victory, only a heavy, necessary release. As the meeting ended, Ben's desperate eyes met mine one final time, pleading silently for mercy, forgiveness, another chance, but this time my gaze held no hesitation, no regret. Sophie, Ben began weakly, voice shaking, but I calmly shook my head, drawing a boundary I'd never dared to draw before. Goodbye, Ben. Stepping outside, the cool air hit my face, refreshing, cleansing. For the first time, I felt truly free, not from Ben, but from a lifetime spent chasing validation from people incapable of seeing my worth. And although the future felt uncertain, I knew with absolute clarity that I'd finally reclaimed myself. In the weeks following the confrontation, I moved out of the house Ben and I had once filled with dreams, laughter, and promises, now empty of anything but painful memories. My new apartment, small yet cozy, greeted me with walls painted a soft shade of ivory, blank canvases ready for the colors I would finally choose myself. Standing alone in my new space, surrounded by boxes and bare furniture, I took a deep breath, inhaling the unfamiliar scent of freedom. The first few days felt strange. I found myself often pausing mid-task, expecting Ben's opinions, his criticisms, or approval that never came. Each silence reminded me gently that from now on, my life belonged solely to me. One evening, unpacking boxes in the kitchen, I stumbled upon an old cookbook, its worn cover creased and faded. Flipping through its pages, I realized I hadn't cooked purely for myself in years. Every meal had been tailored to someone else's taste, someone else's preference. I smiled quietly, flipping the pages until I found a recipe that sounded perfect simply because it appealed to me. That evening, I stood in my tiny kitchen, music softly filling the air, spices scattered joyfully around the countertop. As I stirred the sauce, I realized my hands were steady, confident, not trembling with anxiety or doubt as they once did when Ben watched me critically from across the room. "Smells amazing," Rachel's voice startled me. She leaned against the doorway, holding a bottle of wine, a gentle smile lighting her face. I smiled softly, genuinely. First time cooking for myself. No expectations, no second guessing. "About time," she said warmly, pouring 2 glasses of wine. "Welcome back, Sophie." Her simple words nearly brought tears to my eyes. It truly felt like I'd returned home, not to a physical place, but to a deeper understanding of who I was and what I deserved. In therapy, Dr. Harris encouraged me to reclaim things I'd lost, small pleasures, interests, parts of my identity I'd sacrificed in my quest for external approval. One Saturday afternoon, on a whim, I visited a cozy bookstore downtown. Wandering through shelves lined with novels, poetry collections, and memoirs, I felt a quiet excitement stir within me. It had been years since I'd allowed myself the simple joy of getting lost in a story. Sitting at the cafe next door, sipping a cappuccino and opening the crisp pages of a new book, I felt a surprising, profound contentment, one born purely from self-care, independent of anyone else's approval or expectation. My laughter escaped freely at witty dialogue, loud enough that the woman at the next table glanced over, smiling at my genuine enjoyment. For the first time in years, embarrassment didn't follow, only pure, authentic joy. Yet despite my progress, moments of doubt still lingered, sneaking in unexpectedly. Late at night, I found myself scrolling through old messages and photographs, haunted by questions that refused to vanish entirely. Had there been a moment I could have stopped it all, seen the truth sooner, avoided the pain altogether? One evening, as these doubts threatened to overwhelm me again, my phone rang unexpectedly. Emma's name flashed brightly across the screen, and when I answered, her voice was warm, steady. Stop torturing yourself, Sophie. You did everything you could, she reminded me gently. It's time you forgave yourself for trusting someone who didn't deserve you. Her words, simple yet powerful, resonated deeply within me. I finally understood clearly that my strength wasn't in never experiencing pain, it was in acknowledging it, embracing it, and transforming it into resilience. Slowly, day by day, I felt myself reclaiming more of my identity, finding joy in ordinary things I'd long overlooked. I filled my apartment with plants Ben had once claimed were messy, cooked recipes he'd never approved of, and laughed openly without fearing judgment. At work, colleagues began noticing my transformation, complimenting my renewed confidence. Each morning, as I walked past mirrors, the woman I saw staring back at me was stronger, more self-assured. Not the perfect, polished Sophie I'd pretended to be, but a genuine person, flawed yet authentic. It was in these quiet moments, simple yet profound, that I began to truly understand the depth of Dr. Harris's words. Real love respects boundaries. It honors your authenticity. And finally, after years of silence, I realized the voice I'd needed to hear all along had always been my own. Time passed quietly, stitching my shattered life back together, one gentle thread at a time. My apartment had transformed from a bare, impersonal space into a cozy sanctuary filled with small comforts chosen purely for my joy. Every morning, sunlight streamed warmly through the open curtains, and I'd sip my coffee slowly, savoring the peace I had never fully appreciated before. Yet healing wasn't simple or linear. There were still moments when memories would ambush me unexpectedly. Fragments of laughter, whispered promises, the touch of Ben's hand. Each reminder carried with it a subtle ache, but gradually the sting softened, replaced by something gentler: acceptance. One afternoon, as I wandered through a farmer's market, browsing stalls filled with vibrant produce and freshly baked bread, I spotted Ben across the street. He stood near a cafe patio, laughing easily with a woman whose face I didn't recognize. My breath caught briefly in my chest, a familiar tension returning. But this time it quickly dissolved. I felt no jealousy or bitterness, only curiosity. They moved close, Ben gently brushing her hair behind her ear, smiling warmly, the same practiced charm he'd once shown me. Yet watching them, I felt a surprising calmness, even relief. Ben was no longer my burden, his deception no longer my problem to solve. He had chosen his path, and now I was finally free to choose mine. That evening, curled up on my couch with a book, I received a message from Emma. "Dinner tonight? Celebrating you." I smiled, warmth blooming in my chest as I typed back quickly, "I'll be there." At dinner, Emma raised her glass, smiling brightly. "To new beginnings, and to the bravest woman I know." I laughed softly, feeling warmth spread through me. Around our small table, my closest friends toasted enthusiastically, their genuine love washing over me like sunshine after rain. It wasn't grand or elaborate, but in that simple gesture of friendship, I felt profoundly seen, valued, and loved. Yet even as I healed, life wasn't without its challenges. Late one evening, while tidying up, I discovered an old photo album hidden beneath a pile of blankets, an artifact I'd overlooked in the move. Flipping through photographs of Ben and me, tears stung my eyes. Not for what I'd lost, but for the woman who once believed love meant losing herself. A quiet knock startled me from my thoughts. Opening the door, I found my mother standing uncertainly in the dim hallway, eyes hesitant and vulnerable. "Mom?" My voice wavered slightly, caught off guard. She stepped forward slowly, her expression filled with a sadness I rarely saw. "Sophie, can we talk?" Inside, seated awkwardly at the small kitchen table, my mother spoke softly, voice filled with regret. "I realize now how much pressure we've placed on you, how we made you feel your value depended on pleasing us, on being perfect. I'm so sorry." Her words caught me by surprise, bringing tears unbidden to my eyes. "Why now?" I asked softly. She hesitated, struggling to find the right words. "Watching you face everything with Ben, it made me see clearly how unfair we've been. Love shouldn't come with strings attached. You deserved better from all of us." A long silence settled gently between us. I reached across the table, carefully taking her hand, feeling years of unspoken hurt slowly ease. "Thank you for saying that." Our reconciliation was imperfect, fragile, but real. It wasn't a perfect resolution, just a cautious, hopeful beginning, grounded firmly in truth. Months later, standing alone by the ocean, waves crashing softly against the shore, I watched as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of gold and pink. Breathing deeply, I felt my heart swell with something rare and beautiful, genuine happiness. Happiness born not from others' approval, but from finally recognizing my own worth and strength. As twilight deepened around me, a quiet certainty settled into my soul. Life wasn't perfect, and perhaps never would be. But perfection wasn't the goal anymore. What mattered was embracing life authentically, living courageously, setting boundaries that honored who I was, and recognizing that I was already enough, exactly as I was. And standing there, beneath the endless open sky, I knew clearly. My story wasn't ending, it was finally beginning.